Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Okay, and we're back for part 2. I'm here with David Graham. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend you do so. Otherwise, much of this may not make too much sense. Welcome back. Thanks, what we were saying in the last one was, well, we talked about a lot of stuff, but we'd managed to only get about halfway through your career journey, I think, at that point. So we should go back to that because I'm really interested to get to where you are now. You're doing a lot of really interesting stuff. So you had your first business and then exited that business. So what happened from that point onwards? Once you had that first exit, what did you? I mean, did you just take a long holiday first and foremost, or did you just jump straight into the next thing?
Well, interesting story there. And I had young kids at the time, and there's sort of 2 weeks of just, well, I say 2 weeks, maybe it was a bit longer, bumming around the house. And I think they had to say what their parents did at school one day. And I don't think my daughter knew the difference between unemployed and had exited a business. So I think she described me as unemployed.
Right.
And it was the wake-up call.
Technically, that's correct.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So it just came with a really bad connotation or stigma.
Yeah.
I thought, I better start doing something with my life. But no, just a sort of opportunity presented itself. Like I said in the last episode, I was based in LA, but doing a lot of work with gaming properties in Vegas and Reno. Gosh, I mean, that was mental. People don't really ask people to come and sort out their businesses until things get really, really bad. We were talking about consulting in the last episode. So
that's a very good point. Actually, people are they're in denial a lot of the time, so it really gets very, very bad before you're called in. Yeah.
And and if I can highlight what that was it felt like a lot of marriage counselling, and again back to what we were talking about in terms of culture. I mean, great friends that have set up businesses together, great businesses that have got it right for so many years. It's typically somewhere along the route they either don't get on anymore or they don't share the same values, and the culture's the bit that's broken. So it was always the way that I sort of jumped in. But it gave me a lot of experience. Obviously, Chapter 11 in the US. And I was commuting back and forth. I was doing sort of 2 weeks there and a week at home, and then pretending I was still in LA. So my day used to start at like 5 p.m. and finish whenever. And I used to have to pretend I knew what the weather was and keep up with LA news when I wasn't there for the week. But it sort of taught me a lot in terms of regards to framework. And that sort of gig ended after about a year and a half. But I'd had all those sort of connections, and I hadn't, born in Cape Town, I hadn't lived there as an adult. I just thought, oh well, if it only lasts a year, and like I said, had young kids. So spontaneous is I'm probably underplaying spontaneous. I landed on the Thursday. I drove past a business on that drive, and we bought that business on the Monday. So there was sort of no going back. I think there was an opportunity to go back to the States. That the idea was perhaps we were going to move there. But once I'd made, I'm not going to say a mistake, but once I'd made that commitment, we were there for a period of time. But then just sort of used that sort of opportunity to help struggling businesses, and typically it was, can we help? And a lot of the founders of these sort of hospitality businesses just said, no, you can't. I'm not interested anymore. I'm out. Do you want to buy this for £1 or 20 rand? I think was my thing. So we picked up 5 properties for maybe 100 rand total, but had huge amounts of debt. It was a very exciting time. So really sort of put that turnaround knowledge to great use. Just got them sort of back on track and eventually sold those. I think our last sale was 2019. Had the idea that we could sell it as a group, but I was getting I was getting far more scrap value if we broke them up and sold them singly. And at the same sort of time, one of them was almost like the precursor to WeWork. It was this idea that we could have again, leveraging, well, there's a great restaurant at night, but what's it doing during the day? So we had this idea that a whole bunch of founders could come to an environment and work. I'm not saying it was very successful, but the success that did come out of it was I then founded an EdTech business with a great friend of mine that was the idea that, so schools essentially were sending millions and millions of SMSs out to parents, and I said, they have heard of apps, haven't they? Why don't we come up with this comms app? And the idea was going to be a bit like WhatsApp, and then understanding what teachers wanted. They were like, oh, well, I don't want to give out my number. So basically, it was a WhatsApp, but to onboard, you used a code, and there were some safety features in that a teacher couldn't be. There was never any one-on-one conversations. But effectively, it was a school's comms app, and we threw payments into that, and we threw content through that as well. But from ideation to selling to a big pension fund in South Africa called Liberty, who wanted to use it for its loyalty program, was 18 months start to finish. It was a mental journey.
Wow.
I look back on those times in terms of it was probably the most efficient I've ever been in really understanding who the audience was, building something for that, really understanding what my exit was, and the exit was planned for 5 years. And there came an opportunity where they said, do you really want to keep this? We would love to have this in our program. What are your thoughts on selling it? Thinking that I would say, no, it's my baby, I love it. But it was my second one. I wasn't really that into it. It was a problem and a solve. And I thought we'd done a pretty good job on it. And they had to make a few tweaks to it to fit what they were doing. And we leapt at it. There were no golden handcuffs to it. So one day I was doing that, and the next day I wasn't. And on that, it was great. I look at it now and think, you always think, oh, we could have got a lot more money, but sometimes I think your time is best served doing something you love rather than something that you spotted an opportunity and I think we did a good solve, and I knew it was going to be difficult. But look, the big learning I think between 1 and 2 was, and I say this for all the subsequent exits, is you realise it's got nothing to do with features and everything to do with go to market. Like if you've got a route to market and you're doing the bare minimum to start with, and you can prove it, you'd be surprised how long the bare minimum goes for, right? It's crazy. I look back at it now and look at the features. I even look at something like, and I don't mean to slight them, they've got a great business, but we were essentially the parent pay. We had parent pay as a module, the parent pay module that they have in this country.
I can't stand parent pay.
And okay, well you said it, I can't.
I can't stand it. It drives me up the wall. I have to use it for my kid. It is the worst fucking app I've ever seen.
I don't even downloaded the app. I was so pissed off.
Sorry,
the
Parent
web.
Pay. Please sponsor me. No, don't sponsor me.
But they're living proof that they understand their audience and they get away with doing the minimum thing. Look, I'm not going to. The kudos I'll give them is that it is EdTech or payment tech within the EdTech sector or education sector. It's tough. It's why I don't. Even in the role that I'm doing now. Funny enough, I wrote an email to someone who said, "Oh, which EdTech companies have you worked for? What did you raise for them?" I said, "I just don't see EdTech. I just think people are so scared of it, getting into it." What was the points that I put down? And look, to all EdTech founders, please prove me wrong, but you're in a very noisy, fragmented market. Everyone thinks they know what the solve is, but your buyers are both or either time and cash poor. You could have the greatest idea, take it to a state school and present it to the head. I mean, that guy is barely keeping the lights on and trying to run his organization. The idea that you're going to come in and check, like, even if it's a time save, I just think it's a great example of, you might have the world's greatest idea, but if the go-to market or the market just don't want it because they don't have time, it's not that it's not a great product.
It's just not priority.
It's just not a priority. You're going to struggle, right?
Yeah, I literally did a pro bono session with two founders yesterday where there was something like, it wasn't EdTech, but it was something like that. Funnily enough, it was for hospitality. And they were solving a problem. I was just like, I know from running these businesses in the past, this is not a priority. It's like, you can come to me and make all the claims you want that it saves time, makes a bit, saves a bit of money. I'm like, but in the grand scheme of things, I've got all of these things that I care about way more than this problem. I was like, you need to make the value proposition way, way better. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's a similar thing to what your point is, about EdTech.
And if that's the one thing I can leave people with today, Greg, is when you're evaluating your solution. I think problems are easy to find. I think solving the solution or coming up with a solution that's scalable is still, playing field is wide open. I still believe that. I think AI only adds to that, and I've used those two letters. I wondered how long it was going to take me, but AI isn't a thing. AI does a job. It would be my piece, but that's not the bit that I want to do. I've even sidetracked myself then. It's the mind of a founder just gets easily distracted. It's like ADHD fumble in the dark. But the one thing I want to leave people with is really assess how easy, and I think that's why even in what I do currently now, people say how easy is it going to be for me to raise money. I think the assessment that all these fundraising ups and downs are secular, and we're right now in a phase where people are really assessing whether this thing can make a return, and that they want to understand that you've tested that market. And people look, again, like you, we don't know. I'm not the sage of Omaha. I don't have a magic 8 pool ball in my back, like shaking up, is this going to work? And I don't want to know. I don't want to impact anyone's idea that they think it's going to work. But what I would say is really evaluate through getting early traction, pilots, etc., whether someone's got the time. And look, and don't bullshit yourself on that stage either, right? It's like, it's easy to give something away. As I always put it, it's super easy selling a tenner for £8. But what you've got to figure out is, not only will someone buy it, will it become sticky in the organization? Do they have the ability to roll it out that it makes an impact? Because that's where you're going to get both case studies and repeat sales from. Really spend some time in there. And you know what? It's why I speak long and hard about spend as much time you can in that value proposition stage, that understanding who your addressable audience is, will they buy it? Because in all of those situations, in my experience in particular, there's often ideas where I thought I've taken it to that stage, and then I've had to pivot at that stage, and I haven't felt bad about it because, again, those are learnings from the restaurant world, right? Yeah. It's like when you start a new restaurant, you can say what you want to cook, but if someone comes in 27 times and says, I want a grilled cheese sandwich, what am I going to say? No. It's like, I'll just make you a grilled cheese sandwich. Oh, look, the grilled cheese sandwich is now on the menu, and all of a sudden you're a grilled cheese sandwich a restaurant. Like, who cares, right? If you understand what the market want and pivot, because at the end of it, you can always really sort of define it down to, what's my actual value add here? Like, what am I actually doing? Like, if I stripped everything away, I often ask founders when I speak to them now, if I gave you 5 million quid, but you could only build one thing, what would it be? And actually, the purpose of that question is, let's forget about the money, because your money is tied to what you think you're building. Tell me the one thing you will build. And then in the understanding of that, you realize actually to build that isn't going to cost me that much money. So if I had 5 million quid, I've got another 4,800,000 to spend on getting this thing to market. And that, forget what the raise is. If you then sort of take that back, it sort of gives you a clue on what you actually need to do and what's going to make you immediate revenues. And it really defines your that sort of immediate addressable audience that you're solving for. If you think about, I was having to explain this to. I often go down rabbit holes with my mum. She's genuinely interested in what I do, but then ask me these really tough questions. And she was asking me, I just don't, I think in her head is like, why would people value something that isn't really a something yet? I think I said, most valuations start at about 1 million quid these days. I don't get a deck these days that says, oh, I'm valuing myself at 500,000. So the sort of entry level these days is about £1 million. And it's kind of a hard thing to justify when you're at a pre-seed stage, have a POC, no sales, no real sort of traction. But it's the standard marker, and there's a number of reasons that's in place, and we won't get into it now. But in explaining like where did this come from, it came from a whole bunch of developers building custom stuff for people pre-2008. When 2008 arrived, there was no more money left within these companies to pay a developer to do the one thing. So the developer had to say, well, if I'm doing this one thing for you and there's 1,000 of you or 10,000 of you or 1 million of you, well, why not go and just build the generic? And in building the generic, it costs a lot more, but look at the addressable market I've got. And if you remember it like that, it actually then leads you into, again, and I'm sure you find this, is to your point earlier, is a lot of people don't understand that if you're asking money from someone, that you have to be investable. And those fundamental 101s in how to get investable is, I'm going, this has got the potential to 10x or 20, and I would say it's probably 20x these days. Because if you look at an investor, they're saying, well, I don't know if it's going to work. I'll give you the money, but you're part of a portfolio of 10. 5 are going to fail. 3 are going to do all right. One's going to shoot the lights out, and one's going to be the moonshot, right? Or you're lucky if you get to the moonshot one. And so when someone's looking at that, they're saying, I can't take a risk. Great business, but if you 8x me in the next 8 years, that's not a risk I'm willing to take. There's nothing wrong with your business. There's nothing wrong with what you're trying to achieve. You've probably got a more solid business.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
At an 8x sometimes, because you understand that, but you're not investable from an angel or a VC, and you sort of have to go on that journey.
Yeah, the maths are different.
So I think the maths are completely different, and I spend a lot of time telling people that either their ambition needs to be, or make that decision. Do you want to be that ambitious, or are you happy with a business that's going? And look, again, massive advocate. There is nothing wrong with building a business that pays you, your missus, a couple of your mates, and you make good money that you put in your back pocket at the end of every month, and you've got that life balance you talk about. There is a huge decision to be made that I want this thing to be massive, and now I've got investors to report to. It's a conscious decision, and one that
it is a bit of
everybody for that.
You're absolutely right. The amount of founders that I speak to where I do generally think this is a great business idea. There's no doubt about it. You can clearly make this business work, and you can make money. But it doesn't need to. You don't need to be looking at investment. Like just run a business. Just build a business. Like 100%. But there's an allure to to going to seek funding and to feel like you're part of that startup movement, right? You know, in inverted commas, like, and to be part of that clique, to be part of that group, then part of that is to have a pitch deck and to say that you're raising. You know what I mean? And I think that's such a shame, because I think there's a lot of businesses that will never actually come to fruition. There's a lot of people that will never find out that they're good at, you know, being a business owner,
Sure.
because they've chased that dream to the point where then it's no longer sustainable to actually continue chasing it, because they've spent all the time chasing investment and no time on building the business. And you know, and that's the harsh truth as well, is that, you know, raising investment, it is a full-time job, although we will get to your business and how that might change that dynamic, but it is generally a full-time job, which means that you are taking away your focus from just the fundamentals on sales, really, which is ultimately it, because it is this. And what the irony there is, it's exactly the same skill sets that are needed for both. And so if you're learning the hard way to find PMF with investors, to find the right kind of profile with investors and all that, and you do that for a year and then you fail, you should have been doing that with customers, and you could have been earning revenue and building credibility and traction that way. So it is tough, though. I get it, you know, and you know, I've been in that position myself many times before. We took the decision with our particular business now to be announcing a raise soon, but that's because it's a very large, ambitious, disruptive project.
Sure.
And that's the only reason why and I was very, very, it took a very long time for me to come around to it, to be honest. I really didn't want to go down that route. And it wasn't until I went for a couple of beers with some investor friends of mine, a couple of angels, a couple of VCs, and I was talking to them. I said, what do you think? What do you think? And they were like, you're going to have to raise.
Yeah.
You're going to have to raise.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, really? Like, yeah, you're going to have to. You know, it's like, you could do it slow, but it's too slow for this industry. You're going to have to raise. I was like, okay, fine. You know?
I'm in exactly the same position. You know, it's that, you know, yes, we do raising for people, and people should, you know, people would argue that what I do now, it should be relatively easy for us to raise. And it's not that it wouldn't be, it's that I don't know if I want investors. I just love that this thing is mine. And, you know, yes, it's a lot of work. And yes, I could probably accelerate what we do a lot. All the benefits of having cash in the bank is great. Look, there is something, you know, like you, we've also got an ambitious project for 2025, and it's inevitable that I'm going to have to raise. But it's been nice bootstrapping. I forgot how much I loved it. I forgot how much I love being in control of that piece. And, you know, it sort of leads to the last exit I had. Quite a nice little segue is it was a decision that we found out, and that business has gone on. You know, I exited there, but that business has gone, and it was booking technology for small independent hotels. So using a bit of my knowledge, understanding what would be ideal for, you know, what technology would be ideal for a certain type of property. They didn't need the space shuttle; they just needed the sort of stripped down version of that. But the ambition around that, we had, you know, we're one of very few companies that had access to the Expedia. You know, again, that whole idea came around from a really sort of organic and a great understanding of what our clients wanted. It started as a return on advertising spend idea, in terms of it's a Saturday night, someone's trying to book your hotel. You're full because, or, you know, with a small hotel, you know, that's your busiest night. You've done all the hard work to get someone to your website. What do they do then? They leave your website, go onto booking.com. You've lost all that data. You've lost all that. You've lost that commission split. You've lost that understanding of what someone would have paid you. So a good example is, you know, those hotels that are near racecourses for Cheltenham Gold Cup, or, you know, Aintree, was that they're using the same pricing that they did from last year and the year before, but we could then start provide them to say, actually, someone left your site and went and paid double what you were asking for on that night, maybe start looking at your strategy, your pricing strategy for next year. And that sort of grew into something else. But exited on a conscious decision that while a raise was possible, the ask and the pressures were putting up that the VCs, or I would say VCs because it was a VC play. The pressure that VCs would have put on that business at the very start would have just been too much to bear. And that's why the sort of conscious decision was to sort of walk away from raising that money. And at that point, the business can only support a number of staff, and that's why I exited. Again, timing brilliant, because that was sort of late 2019, March 2020. We went into lockdown, which had killed all those plans. There was an offshoot that I tried to do, is one of my failures. Offshoot that I tried to do, that we did a build using that API because we had it and we were willing to take the risk. Closed our SEIS round. Some of the investors were waiting to getting that assurance. I think that was the 14th of March that I got that. 14th of March that I got that in. There were rumblings of something happening. Obviously got ghosted from the 19th of March onwards. So, it is again, the lesson there is any investment is a confidence-led exercise, right? And there's also another one that I love to think about, that is time kills all deals. Had I wrote that email on the 15th, I probably would have closed that round. I chose to write that email on the evening of the 18th, and obviously the 19th, Boris shut us all down. So there's some real sort of points in terms of, just in conclusion, I think you really got to assess whether that's the journey that you want to take. And the other thing I would say is what that's going to buy investors, and we can talk about that in depth. There's a few slides in pitch decks that frustrate me, even as an angel investor. But certainly when I do the advisory pieces, everyone knows they need a why now slide. No one gets it right. Everyone knows they need a use of fund slide. No one gets it right. Well, I'm
finalizing my deck right now. So come on, tell me what is it people get wrong about those two slides?
I mean, look, on the why now and why you, I think that there is a fundamental change, because what you're trying to mitigate the risk in an investor's head is what's fundamentally changed. Like, it takes the assumption that you're not the first person to think about this, but are you uniquely placed? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have some sort of IP? Have you got an idea of how you solve that problem differently? What's changed in the market that you can evidence that now is the time that's right to do that? And look, it should be easy to do because it's almost like part of your solution, but you're really defining it for an investor, saying, if this is such a great idea, why hasn't it been done before? You're answering that question with a why me and why now slide, right? Is like, because of my skills, or because of this change, or because, let me give you an example. Why was that possible? Why was it possible that we were going to launch that travel tech booking piece? Is because there was no access to an Expedia API before that. That's what and changed in that market. And if I'd read that, I would then go, oh, this is why no one's done it before. And it wasn't just, and to make an investor understand, it wasn't just an embed or a affiliate thing that it went off to hotels.com or whatever. It was embedded. No one would know the product, because I'm a big believer that UI is the make or break. Just look at Amazon. I don't think they do anything different to anyone e-commerce, but they have your address, they have your card details. You're pushing one button to buy the thing you want, and it's going to be there the next day. Everyone knows now. But when people said, "Oh, I never thought Amazon's going to win," I said, "Don't worry. I can see that all it is a convenience play. It's not that you can't get those products somewhere else. They're certainly not cheaper, which is where everyone thought they were doing it. But Amazon figured that out. They said, "Oh, do we have to be cheaper? No, we just have to know that people are just happy that they don't have to get in their car today if it's going to
Right.
arrive on their doorstep tomorrow, right? But that for me is that really understanding what's fundamentally changed in all the sort of all the sort of changing dynamics within in the environment, that you're saying now's the time, and this is how we're going to do. And again, this is where I'd reinforce, remember, we're only starting with this, and this is what we're going to solve, which is a lovely segue into the use of funds round, or use of funds slide. And please put on there what the actual ask is. Please tell me if you've got, if you're at that stage. Please tell me if you've got SEIS assurance, and if the slide has to change daily, weekly, monthly, tell me how much of that assurance is left, because there's a lot of SEIS investors out there that just want to fill an allocation, don't really care whether you're going to do this well enough. I'm really giving away trade secrets here, but but most importantly, tell me what the use of those funds are going to achieve. What is the goal of this first bit? If it gives you a 12 to 15 month runway, I don't care whether you're alive or not if you're not delivering on what you said you were going to do, because that's my marker of when I check in with you, I can say, how's it going to, are you going to have the 5,000 downloads? Are you going to build your are you going to have built the product better? Have you increased your virality? Whatever your metrics and markers of success, that is the way, as an angel investor, or any investor for that matter, are going to track you on the right way. And it's a really good discipline to get into, especially for VCs, because while they might want a board seat and might turn up to a board meeting every 4 months, or 3 months, whatever the case may be, however monthly, if that's the way you've done it. It's the one story you can always take them back to. As it gets really noisy and everything that's going on, if you can frame it up, remember when I borrowed money for you, I said we were going to do this. Well, we're 50% of the way there. We're 6 months in. Therefore, what we're forecasting now makes a lot more sense. And then my last point about use of funds is,
I've just got to quickly interrupt this episode for a quick announcement, and that is that if you are a tech founder, a CEO, a business owner, well, the chances are that's probably why you're listening to this show. It is called Founders Unplugged after all. And if that's the case, then you really need to listen to what I've got to say. So look, as someone that's been in the tech startup world now for a very, very long time, and as a founder and worked with lots of businesses globally, working in those companies has taught me a really big lesson. And that is that finding the right tools for your team can truly change your business. That's why I'm really excited that today's episode is sponsored by Deal. That's DEEL. It's an all-in-one platform for global teams. Deal is designed with the needs of a global workforce in mind. Seamless contract signing, easy expense uploads, in-platform time-off management. They can handle paperwork, exchange foreign salaries into local ones, and ensure compliance with local regulations, and loads more. Plus, its customer support team is available 24/7, and that is really, really important. If you're ready to see how Deal can transform your global operations, head to deal.com, that's DEEL.com, to book your demo today. So thank you so much for Deal for sponsoring today's episode. You can use the link in the description or the QR code on the screen down there somewhere. And now we'll get back to the episode.
And I know it's difficult, and I hate to give generalist advice, but I do strongly believe your chances of success increase massively if you can say that I'm using your money to I'm exposing as much of your capital to growth as I possibly can. Be it marketing, anything development orientated, is not because we want it to look prettier, but because we want to increase the virality, or we want this to be a lot more shareable, or by adding this feature, we already know because we've been asked 25 times to use it from a B2B perspective, as an example, that by doing this integration, we think we'll onboard 30 more customers. It's always going back to that goal that we spoke about, that we're doing it. Likewise, marketing, be that marketing that is advertising on social media, or marketing for me encompasses the sales team as well. I understand what the play is. I'm going to use some of that money to optimize my founder-led sales strategy at the moment. I as an investor, that's the slide that gives me the most confidence that you're not going to take my money and waste it. I was going to use something rude there, but I won't.
Piss it up the wall.
Piss it
Yeah,
up the wall.
yeah,
Okay,
but you're
said
absolutely right, because I see that time and time again, where usually it's like, oh, we're going to take, the 1 mil, and we're going to use 90% of it to give to a marketing agency, and basically sit there and pray that it starts selling our products. Like that's usually what it is, which is terrifying. But that's useful.
At each stage, Greg, it's understanding what the story is, right? So from a pre-seed stage, I think you've got the wrong investor if they're asking for a return. I think you've got the right investor at a pre-seed SEI stage to say, you're already getting 50% from HMRC. Don't expect us to shoot the lights out. We don't quite know the answers to this yet. We're going to try 10 things, and if all we achieve in that is a replicable thing that we can do again, then we're going to go out. But like each one of those campaigns costs a little money. Each one of, each way that we improve our sales cycle means that we're starting to get, and I wouldn't say metrics because I don't think it's the metric stage yet. And if you are coming up with metrics at that stage, I'm not sure if I believe them.
More like proto metrics, right?
Proto metrics. I like that word. Proto metrics. I'm going to use that from now on. Proto metrics, and you're not going to get anywhere near to a CAC versus LTV piece. I mean, how you can give me your LTV value when you're sort of 12 months old, I've got no idea, because if you've still got that customer from day dot, they're still a customer that is currently an infinite LTV. And your cost of acquisition, you'd be wrong to give me that number now, because it's in no way optimized yet that you can say that we can do it. Now, look, a lot of
I've always seen it. No, I've always seen that more of just like, okay, are you at least taking the time to build those infrastructures, those operational processes, let's say, to be able to evaluate that to me is more valuable than the actual number itself. It's just oh, okay, you've taken the time to do that. That's good. That's one thing done. It's out the way. How accurate is that? What is the information fed into those numbers? Okay, good. Because if it's going to get more complicated later, so it's good that you've done that now. You know what I mean? That's what I really take more away from that than the actual results. You know what I mean?
And so, I think pre-seed, you're saying we don't really, like, if I can really condense it down in the way I see it as stages and what traction you've got to evidence at what stage that you're doing. Pre-seed, to your point, is that those proto metrics, and who can we go and take it to our addressable audience? That means you haven't solved yet what other variants of this may be. There might be a variant in there that's better than your original idea. So there's those sort of mini pivots. You just want to be speaking to people, getting them using it, and then let them tell you what they find helpful in that. I think at Seed, you've done all that sort of Q&A. You're figuring out, there's 5 to 6 people that we could address. We have limited budget, limited resource. We can't speak to them all. Which one are we going to choose? And that's where you're testing which one you're going to double down on, which one or two you're going to double down on, and go after that. And then I think when you're at Series A, it's like, we now really get it, right? We understand who our customer is. We had to build some other features for them to be our ideal, our ICP. Now we're just ramping up those sales, and it's that fat middle. Yes, there's some organic stuff that other people are using it in other ways, but we really got a good understanding of what the product does, what we've got evidence back to build out our case studies and for our product to become sticky. And then, like I said, at that point I bail. But Series B is just, I've done that in my home market. Let me go and do that worldwide, right? And it's going to take a lot more money to set up an office and do these things. And people argue is that Series B, C, or D? I think that's Series B is where it starts. So understanding, and coming back to what I think important is on a traction slide, it's sticking to that and saying, don't be embarrassed that you've asked clients questions and you've got some pilots that you had to give away and you've had to sell at half price or with a 25% discount. I think that's exactly the right investor. That's exactly what they want to hear. To your point earlier in the previous episode, where you say what the thing you don't want to do at that stage, right, is to make a mistake so heinous the little muck up you did at that stage, then you got to, and I've seen it happen, you got to Series A and you go, shit, we don't know who our addressable audience is, we don't actually know what value we're bringing here, and we're retrospectively fitting our solution and then trying to find a problem.
Yeah.
And so you can...
Yeah, if the foundations are rotten, you're screwed.
You're screwed.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, you've raised a lot of money at that point, and you're going to have some really angry people that said, "But I thought you figured this out, right?"
I've got a question for you. So this is something that I tell a lot of founders, and I'd be curious to know if you agree with it, which is that that traction is the buzzword, right? It's the word that every investor now says they want to see, even angels now, where traditionally in the past angels weren't necessarily as concerned with traction. They were, more investing in people and ideas and things like that. So traction is the big thing. But what I tell a lot of people is don't misinterpret that traction doesn't necessarily mean revenue, and that traction can be demonstrated in different ways. What do you think?
Agree.
You agree with that? So what are some of those ways? I'd be curious to know what you think some of those ways that you can demonstrate traction, both pre-seed and seed, right? Because we've got to remember they're two separate categories for a reason, but there is some crossover. What would you say, those forms of traction could be other than revenue?
I think at a pre-seed stage is to while it doesn't have to be revenue, I do think there needs to be test of usage. So as an example, working with a femtech app now, everyone is saying exactly that thing. It's like, oh, we'd like to see you do some revenue first, and I'm saying I think those are the wrong investors for you. I think what you're trying to do is build your audience, because you don't really get an understanding of what your metric is, your conversion metric is, between having a decent enough audience that is getting value from your product and building credibility, and then saying, hey, do you want a subscription? So for them, it's like it's content. The content is being used. That doesn't again say that you can't try little things. So they're putting together a standalone tester box that they're trying to sell on TikTok, and they're trying to sell through the app at the moment. It's not built into the app. It's not costing a lot of money. Just spinning up a Shopify store, speaking to the 1,000 people that have downloaded the app, got their email address, and say, hey, would you like to use this tester kit? From there, you've got an understanding of how that shop build could come, and where revenue and the revenue from both shop and the subscription piece will come from. But to go in and say, right, everyone that downloads, we're just going to force a subscription model down their throats from day dot. You're missing the credibility piece. I hate to use Facebook as an example, but I think what they did right was to say, we really understand why, and theirs is a complete advertising play. But irrespective of what your model is, they really understand what their value add was to their audience, and that trust gave them the virality that you're after. So I would say at a pre-seed stage, don't rush to revenue. But the one thing, I suppose overall, and I'll come to seed in a minute, I think you're right to say don't misinterpret that. Investors are asking you evidence that this isn't 1% inspiration, evidence the perspiration, like without money, what can you do? With a little bit of money, what can you do? I also wouldn't say, I'd stay away from investors that want to give you money in tranches. It's like every time I need to go and speak to you, and it's setting expectations and metrics that aren't right. What I despair of at this stage is I don't think founders are raising enough money, but that's just where we are from a stage perspective. Like if someone says to me they need 250 grand, and they're going to do something in 12 months. Already in my head, it's going to be twice as long, twice as expensive. You're not going to get anywhere near those goals. But at least I know you're on the journey.
It also worries me because if I know how, and we know how long it takes to gear up for raising and then raising. So like if that's 12 month, if that's buying you 12-month runway, you haven't got any time to focus on the business. You're closing that round. You're just about putting the plans in to spend that 250K, and the next thing you know, you need to be gearing up for the next round again.
Yeah,
That's all that runway gone. It's pointless.
It's anywhere between 3 and 7 months at the moment to close a round. I don't care what stage you're at. We've just sort of drifted into Series A. The quickest I'll see at the moment is 3 months. Yeah, hopefully that improves after the budget later this month. But we'll see from there. And then look back to the seed stage, just to some practical pieces there. I do think at that point, I don't care what revenue it is, you've just got to prove that someone is willing to pay for the idea. No one is expecting shoot the lights out money, but you've got to show that you're on a journey to if Series A, and look, I think we'll see more and more bridges in the future, but because I don't think people are raising enough money to get to £1 million ARR, I look back on all those businesses. I mean, £1 million ARR, it's not easy. It's not easy to get there. I think beyond $1 million to 5 million to 10 million is easy. A bit like golf, right? I think getting down to single figures is relatively quite easy. It's almost the reverse. Going from a 10 handicap down to scratch is nigh on impossible sometimes, because it takes time and it takes effort and it sort of takes a real sort of understanding of what you're doing. So I do think we'll see some bridge rounds happening. If that's how investors are looking at tranching money these days, and a seed raise is £500,000 or 750, but actually needed 1.5.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Maybe it's not a bad thing, because you're actually valuations are deflated at the moment. So taking a smaller amount and getting to a point means that you can go back and ask for that other 750 or 500 that you need at a far higher valuation. Then great. But I do think you need to be proving. I also don't think you should be conflating revenue as in tangible revenue that you can depend on. I think at a seed stage you're saying, we're trying different things, trying different models. This is hitting the best, but people are willing to pay us for what we do. And so in some cases, some companies get that really right. They stumble on the right model. They do their marketing piece well. They start making turnover, and we don't have to worry about that too much. But traction means different things I think at different stages.
Yeah. I think it's also maybe worth pointing out, and I would assume that you may agree with this. I don't know, maybe you won't, but it's worth pointing out, I think, that it really depends on the specifics of your business and your industry too, right? So for example, in deep tech, or in certain parts of AI, for example, or in biotech and things like that, what you would expect to see in pre-seed and seed, in terms of traction, are going to be very, very different. I mean, revenue just wouldn't be expected to be seen at either of those stages, really, on some of these deep tech.
The traction in that is evidencing great IP,
right?
Ideally a patent. Why it's so different. What your
team? I mean, team is going to play a huge part of that.
Defensible moat that no one can come along and just
exactly. So
tomorrow.
I just point that out because I think it's again, going back to what we were saying in part one, it's so easy for for someone to then maybe listen to that and for them. Then we go, oh, really? And for them, it would be a very different case. But we're talking very broadly, so which is, I think, important. That
if you really simplify it down, Greg, I think it's like prove to investors that you're doing something without a lot, right? I think that's really what you're sort of like. If it's
I always boil it down similar to that, and I also say prove that you will more than likely you're on the trajectory to success regardless, and it's a steady incline like that. But if they inject money to you, it will be a hockey stick version of it. So you're on your way, but with them, you're going to get there quicker and bigger. Basically, like that's generally what you want to show, right?
And I think the other thing that it says, and maybe it's a wonderful segue into what I do now and what we're
yes,
trying
which
to,
I do want to get there before we have to.
what our goal is. But the segue is quite nice. Is the other thing that I would worry about is that you think that raising money is actually your job. Like, obviously it is, but I don't want you to think as an investor that. And look, and that's the dilemma that we talk about all the time, and that's the dilemma we're trying to solve it directly, right? Is to say, obviously a full-time job. It'll take you, from start to finish, from our calculations, researching the right investors, doing the outreach, doing the nurture campaign. It's like 3 months worth of work, and
Yep.
a couple of those months is wasted work, right? You're not the first person that's gone out and researched a deep tech company for investors. You're the first person that's done that for a consumer app. That exists, but it exists in a very, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? In a not easy to find, and I don't know why it's not easy to find. I don't know why there aren't these sort of communities. I know there are products like ShipShape. Platforms obviously want you. I'm not sure how I feel about platforms. I don't think if platforms really worked, sales would copy it. Back to your point that raising money is like a sales function.
Well, I mean, sales use tools like Apollo and stuff like that. So I guess I can see I understand that there's kind of
the idea of a marketplace, right, is like I put on my side what I do, you put on your side what you're looking for, and some sort of magic happens in the middle. If that was the case,
like a matchmaking type.
If that was the case, no sales would exist in a company ever, right?
Right.
You've got to be persistent. You've got to go out. You've got to take your mountain to Muhammad in that case. But look, finding that information's not easy. I don't think, and I think it's done on purpose. It's very opaque in doing that, and equally, it's opaque because it's a real bugbear of mine. Is VC say our thesis is X, and then the thesis is so broad. It's like, we back founders that are impacting the world. I'm like, every founder thinks they're impacting the world. It just doesn't tell me anything, right? So what we've done at Directive is we've just looked at the data layer on that and saying, I don't really care about your thesis. I'm going to learn more about what you've invested in the last 4 years, at what stage, what sector, what geography, what check size. And essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to accelerate that research stage and that initial outreach stage and putting that together. So it isn't a full-time job for founders. They don't have to think, oh my God, I've got to sit down. And look, right now, let me tell you, it's the perfect environment for us. I don't choose environments typically that well, but it's on my why not why now slide, why me slide. I've sort of got that. Well, we've got that experience. We've done the hard graft, and right now the why now bit is the the difference between success and failure is your constant conversations. You've just got to have, you could get away with reaching out to 100, 150 5 years ago. Sam, we're talking, we're on investor number 704 with some of our clients at the moment because it's just a quantum of conversation and nurturing them and proving. I'm not saying like every advice everyone's ever given you shouldn't be should be thrown out the window. It's just there are people, and hopefully we do it slightly different. I would be back to the charlatan piece. I would be very cautious about brokers who say they've got a network that connect you for. I'm now hearing stories about we'll connect you for percentages of equity in your company. I'm like, wow, be very, very cautious of that. Look, I don't really get them because I never hear of great success of that. It is just hard graft. I mean, we outsource our work to a team that don't sit in this country. They sit in Cape Town. They're people I trust, so we can do it a lot cheaper. There is no secret sauce to this. Is we've just done the graft. We've gone out. I've looked at over 3,000 websites. Personally, I sort of get a feel of what they've done. we look at loads of data sources to get sort of activity into that database, because from our point of view, we want to sort of match that.
So let's just break down, because we haven't really sort of explicitly said what it is that Derelicty, and am I saying that right?
No, directly.
Directly. Sorry, Derelicty. That's right. Thinking of a Zoolander. Directly.
I thought it was
does.
clever, but it's not that clever because no one can say it.
Yeah. I mean, once you think about it, it makes sense that it would be directly.
Yeah.
So just the elevator pitch, as it were. What is it that you guys do?
We essentially looked at how early stage founders accelerate that initial outreach, or I looked at their entire outreach campaign, but that initial outreach. So we're trying to save them from time and distraction in doing that research and that outreach for them, so they can carry on, they can concentrate on the traction piece. So what you don't, like to your point earlier, the worst thing you can do in a fundraising round is either plateau your traction, whatever it may be, sales or what you're trying to achieve, or that starts to dip. If your sales start to fall, or your line of social media falls, or whatever your traction is, we're trying to save that. We're saying to you, it is a full-time job, but it's not your full-time job. Let us do it for you. The way we work, a very small engagement fee, hardly covers even our initial consultation, our initial sort of a call, and then we take a small percentage of what we raise. We're no silver bullet. There are things that you need to do as a founder. You still need to be going to events. You still need to be reaching out to networks. But what we're trying to get people to is, you don't need to be doing 250 to 300 form fills and emails. We're doing that for you. But what I do want you to do is jump on the replies, right? And even if it's a no, turn it into a yes, right? When people say no, well, is there anyone else you can introduce me to? Because I know you've been invested in this before. So
essentially like an SDR as a service, but for investment relations, basically. It's that piece, is it?
Perfect.
Yeah.
But an SDR that already has an SDR that already has a lead list.
Right. So you've got, you're like an SDR with a little black book, basically. Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
That's awesome, and that's it's great, and I've looked at your pricing, and I think it's incredibly reasonable, because obviously the one concern with something like that would be, if your service, and I'm sure you've agonized about this before launching and since, is that if you're going to be creating a product that's targeted towards pre-seed and seed companies that are raising money, well, the chances are they don't have very much fucking money, right? So like you can't create a product that's targeting those organizations and those founders that is going to be ridiculously priced. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people trying to do something similar to what you do that is ridiculously priced or has a heavy payment after the fact, a heavy fee after the fact. And I'm really blown away by actually how affordable what you do is. And packed with value based on what it says on there too. So so look, I mean, I know we do need to wrap things up, but just really briefly, would you just be able to kind of
just on that
sure,
point, Greg? Happy to offer any listener a 20% discount off the back of this if they just type in founders when they get to, if they want to use the service. I mean, look, it always starts with a consultation call anyway, so no one's just going to go straight in and start using it. And it's one thing that we have found, because I'm the first person to say, if we can't help you, I don't want to charge you any money. But if someone has spoken to us before and the thing of using the service and want a discount, 20%, all they do is type in Founders Unplugged, and that discount will be applied.
That's really generous. Yeah, that's great. And obviously, the website and your details, your LinkedIn profile will be on the description of this episode. But that's awesome. Look, just really quickly then, just before we sign off, I'm just really curious. You mentioned that you've got a project that you're working on next year. Can you talk about that, or is this all in stealth? Is this all in secret mode?
No. It's the idea is just whether the market is ready to take that funding. But effectively, we're looking at a number of thematic accelerators. To our points on this call was, I'm not a fan of general help, generalist sort of advice. So we're trying to put together 3 at the moment, I think. One is a SaaS product that's oriented towards SME, where we'll get really tight with the criteria, but as it stands, SaaS aimed at SMEs that are using a founder-led playbook. The other is EdTech, and we've got great connections in EdTech. I know EdTech struggles, but I'm invested into an EdTech company that's really starting to open some doors. So can we leverage off the back of that? And then the sort of unrepresented one, I think, consumer struggles. So a consumer app or product that can take advantage of that intersection of TikTok Shop at the moment are our 3 sort of themes that we're exploring at the moment. But an accelerator program that we will make a 50 grand investment straight off the bat, so that you can, instead of just giving some generous advice, you can start testing some of those strategies that we help you with, and we can really start getting the data. And it solves for me the other problem that we're seeing in the market is we would take the lead position because we would have the experts that say we do that, and then we would obviously look at all SEIS orientated, and then we'd obviously connect you with SEIS as well. But there is always going to be a start to finish in a 12-week program, start here and end there, and hopefully with the lead position, having tested things with a little bit of cash, we can fill the rest of you around and get at least a cohort of 10 in each away, and off on that. So a practical accelerator in short words.
Amazing. Well, that's really exciting. Well, look, if you ever need anyone to come in and talk crap to a cohort of founders, then let me know. That's I do that for a couple of other accelerators.
Don't worry, I've already penned you down. I just haven't told you about it yet. I
see. Okay. All right. I'm jumping the gun a little bit there. No worries. Well, that's awesome. Well, look, we should definitely end it there, because otherwise I have a feeling we'll probably end up going for another couple of hours. I do have a thousand other things I wanted to ask you about. We haven't had time, but we'll do it again, I'm sure. And Absolutely. So I'd love to have you back on and pick your brains more. Look, is there anywhere anyone you want to shout out? Any people? Anywhere you want to direct people to before I let you go?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to come here today. I would say I do have office hours on my website. If anyone wanted to explore anything free for 15 minutes, please feel free to. It's what I love about you, Greg, is that it's all about paying it forward, right?
Yeah,
is trying to help the next sort of generation of founders put their mark on the world. I'm a big believer. This is where growth comes from. This is where this sort of innovation is the bit that sort of moves the world on. And if I was going to shout out to anyone, is any founder out there that's trying to make a change. It's not easy, but keep going at it, because if it wasn't for you, we'd still all be sitting in a cave somewhere.
100%.
We wouldn't have gone anywhere. So anything that I can do to help, please ask. If I can't, I'll say I can't, but if I can, I will.
Yeah. Well, that's a very generous offer. Yeah. And like I said, the link for your website will be down there. Office hours is one of the tabs at the top. You just click that and away we go. Listen, David, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up again very soon and following along with the journey of the accelerator and everything else you guys do. So thank you again. Have a great day.
You too.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe. Or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.